Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. One of the most seismic stories of the past few years is the rise and fall of what you might call the Trump crime wave. The wave began in 2020 when, remember, Donald Trump was president, amidst the backdrop of the social dislocation and chaos of the pandemic and, of course, the George Floyd protests and the police response to them. And, of course, then President Trump also threw fuel on the fire at every opportunity. We saw an enormous spike in crime across red and blue states in small towns and big cities. The murder rate jumped by a record 30%. As you can see in this graph, violent crime overall was up more than 5% in 2020. Over the past 3 years, with President Joe Biden in the Oval Office, we have seen a huge nationwide decline in crime. The latest data even suggests the violent crime rate may have dropped another 15% in just the first 3 months of 2024 compared to the same period last year. So the trends in crime are down, even with some holes in the data from various cities. But the overall picture is clear. Now, of course, the Trump crime wave is about much more than just the macro statistics. Those are the most important for people lived experience. It is, of course, also about the fact that the man himself is a criminal. Just convicted of 34 felony counts here in New York, a man who surrounds himself with criminals, bringing them on stage at a recent rally and even into the courtroom with him during trial. Donald Trump believes that following the rule of law, and this is crucial, is for suckers. He has imbued the Republican Party with his mafia ethos. Snitches get stitches. The top dog should get away with everything. And for all the talk among Trump and his allies about backing the blue, it is clear that when law enforcement is not under his control, as it would be in a sort of authoritarian enterprise, then it becomes the subject of suspicion and even insults. Just look at what happened at the Pennsylvania State House earlier this month. Democrats there welcomed 2 Capitol Police officers who were injured by the violent pro-Trump mob that was out for blood on January 6th. Remember, Donald Trump praises the insurrectionists who beat the cops bloody as warriors and hostages who he promises to free from prison if he is reelected. So when these 2 officers were introduced on the State House floor, listen to how Republicans reacted before they were drowned out by the Democrats.
This morning, it is with incredible honor and humility that for the first time on the floor of this House, we are so thrilled to welcome former United States Capitol Police Sergeant Aquino Gonell and former United States Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. Both of these men were present, physically and verbally attacked, but bravely defended democracy and the United States Capitol against rioters and insurrections on January the 6th, 2021. They are traveling the nation and sharing their stories to raise awareness to the threats of democracy in our nation. Sergeant Gonell and Officer Dunn, please stand. Welcome to the floor of the House.
So Pennsylvania Republicans, you could have heard it there when she talked about threats to democracy. They not only booed and jeered at Sergeant Gonell and Officer Dunn, many of them actually walked out, according to several lawmakers who were there on the floor. And again, it doesn't stop there, right? Whenever any parts of the machinery of law enforcement, state level, federal level, is brought to bear on Donald Trump or his followers, then those folks who are involved in that become the target of violent intimidation and threats. Just about always. Here's an example. Last week, a Texas man was arrested and charged with threatening an FBI agent involved in the Hunter Biden investigation. Now, to be clear, because this headline you might have seen in the periphery, this man was not a Biden fan angry about the conviction of the president's son. No. Rather, he was a Trump supporter angry about a slew of false claims about Hunter Biden and the 2020 election. And you might say, well, these are just the fringes, and there's something to that, but it does go well beyond that. Last month, Donald Trump's allies in the right-wing media went on this crusade against Joe Biden's Department of Justice and the FBI. They took a totally standard part of the warrant used for the document search at Mar-a-Lago, and they turned it into an assassination conspiracy theory.
The Biden administration authorizing the use of deadly force during the FBI's raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in August of 2022.
They were actually thinking of using deadly force, or it's on the table that might be necessary at Mar-a-Lago?
Authorized armed agents to use deadly force in the Mar-a-Lago raid. That is insane. Is there any justification for that?
Absolutely not. My mind as a prosecutor goes to maybe they wanted the engagement of physical force. Maybe they wanted to come in without FBI, without, DOJ, without all of that, identifying so that they could engage in deadly physical force.
Why was Merrick Garland prepping for a possible, shootout?
Deadly force. Does that mean that Joe Biden was authorizing the FBI to if it came to that and he resisted arrest, it would be okay to kill Donald Trump?
That's what it seems.
Okay, that's just a sample of the coverage, right? This got spun up that this was essentially a Biden assassination plot against Donald Trump. And of course, Trump himself jumped right on the conspiracy bandwagon. He blasted out a fundraising email trying to make money off it. Quote, breaking, Biden's DOJ was authorized to shoot me. Joe Biden was locked and loaded, ready to take me out and put my family in danger. Now, as we've seen, as I just told you about the guy who was threatening the FBI agent, those words are obviously very dangerous, which is why Special Counsel Jack Smith has asked the judge overseeing the documents case, Aileen Cannon, Trump appointee, to bar Trump from making statements that endanger law enforcement. In Smith's second petition, after Judge Aileen Cannon denied his first request for a gag order, he writes the former president's, quote, deceptive and inflammatory assertions irresponsibly put a target on the backs of the FBI agents involved in this case, as Trump well knows. Now, here's the thing. In response, a group of 24 Republican state attorneys general from across the country filed an amicus brief. Again, this is a gag order petition in a Florida court, an amicus brief supporting Trump, calling Jack Smith's request, quote, presumptively unconstitutional. Of course, defending the boss's right to falsely accuse the FBI of an assassination plot against him, tangibly endangering lives, is just now what you do in the Trump crime family. It is another election cycle in the Trump era, and as in previous cycles, the Republican Party is fielding a bunch of candidates we like to call, apologies to Paul Feig, freaks and geeks. It has been a feature of this era, the Trumpiest elements of the party has seized control at the grassroots level. And from that perch, and in primary contests, they've successfully elevated extreme candidates who are downright repellent to swing voters in otherwise winnable races. Whatever mojo Trump has when he runs, which again, contested, he lost the popular vote twice, it's proved to not be particularly replicable by his strange fellow Republicans down ballot. We saw this in 2022, of course. Remember, there was supposed to be a massive red wave in that election, but Republicans didn't have candidates who could surf the wave. They fielded Herschel Walker for the Senate in Georgia, a 1980s NFL star who, like Trump, had no political experience and a reputation for serial dishonesty. And when he was being honest, he was, well, rarely coherent.
The other night, I was watching this movie. Called Fright Night, Freak Night, or some type of night, but it was about vampires. I don't know if you know vampires are cool people, are they not? But I'm going to tell you something that I found out. A werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that? I never knew that, so I didn't want to be a vampire anymore. I wanted to be a werewolf.
Then there was Pennsylvania, where the Republican candidate for governor was Doug Mastriano, pictured there on the left at the Stop the Steal rally at the Capitol on January 6th, just before the violent insurrection. You can also see the election-denying, QAnon-embracing Mastriano in this photograph at the left in his Confederate Civil War uniform. Then there was Kari Lake, who ran for governor in Arizona, former TV news reporter who campaigned against the fake news media, not only parroted Trump's lies about the 2020 election, she also subsequently claimed her own election was stolen and still does. And in fact, Lake, who is not the governor, though she thinks she is, or that she won the governorship, she's on the ballot again this year. She is running for Senate against the popular war veteran Ruben Gallego, who's a congressman from Arizona. She's been losing to Gallego in every major poll taken in that race since February, which is to say Republicans are doing the exact same thing again this cycle. Notably in Minnesota, where to take on incumbent Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, Republicans have nominated Royce White, a former NBA player turned InfoWars lover, a guy who has advanced conspiracy theories about everything from Nancy Pelosi's husband and the Federal Reserve, while reportedly managing to owe over $800,000 in child support, is now having to answer questions about why his campaign spent $1,200 at a Florida strip club.
Your claim is there were filings which said you spent campaign funds at a strip club, but they were incorrect filings.
No, they didn't say that I spent the funds at a strip club. Or no, let's say they didn't say that I spent the funds on strippers.
But it was spent at a strip club.
Well, strip club they sell food at the strip club, don't they?
So you've spent the money on food at a strip club. Is that more accurate?
You seem to be very unfamiliar with strippers and strip clubs and drag strip shows. So I'll inform you, maybe
Please.
You aren't informed, that they do have food at strip clubs.
Delicious. White has also railed against the Jewish elite. He's complained that women have become too mouthy. He described the LGBTQ movement as Luciferian. You kind of get the idea. But that's not an isolated incident. There's a Republican candidate for governor of North Carolina, a guy named Mark Robinson, who has spent years posting unbelievable bile about gay folks and Jewish Americans, black folks even. From denying the Holocaust happened to claiming the movie Black Panther was, and I quote here, created by an agnostic Jew and put to film by a satanic Marxist to extract money from black people. Robinson has ranted against women and abortion so many times that his Democratic opponent stitched them together into one absolutely brutal ad.
Let's say I was the governor, I had a willing legislature. We could pass a bill saying you can't have an abortion in North Carolina for any reason.
For me, there is no compromise on abortion. It makes no difference to me why or how that child ended up in that womb.
The abortion in this country is not about protecting the lives of mothers. It's about killing a child because you aren't responsible enough to keep your skirt down.
It's not your body anymore.
Killing a child because you weren't responsible enough to keep your skirt down. Running for governor in North Carolina. This dynamic is haunting Republicans everywhere, including Indiana, where Republican Senator Mike Braun is now running for governor. Now, Braun came prepared with his own pick for lieutenant governor, but rather than accede to his wishes, the state party convention selected Micah Beckwith, a Pentecostal pastor, podcaster, and self-described Christian nationalist whose only public service experience was an unsuccessful attempt to purge controversial books in his local library. Beckwith also gained notoriety the day after the Capitol insurrection for claiming that God had spoken to him and endorsed the rioters.
A lot of people are, freaking out over what they saw, and I can totally understand that. But I was in prayer this morning, and you know what the Lord told me? He said, Micah, he said, I sent those riots to Washington. He said, what you saw yesterday was my hand at work.
It's always in the car, those videos, aren't they? As Michelle Goldberg wrote recently in the New York Times, party insiders are freaked out that Beckwith's candidacy gives Democrats an opening in a truly red state. She adds that Beckwith's elevation is the latest sign of a conflict splitting Republican parties nationwide, as GOP activists demand ever greater levels of purity and belligerence from their leaders. Now, the crazy thing is that even when the party elites get the candidates they wanted, they tend not to be appreciably more palatable to mainstream voters. Remember in Pennsylvania when they got TV Dr. Oz to run for Senate, even though his primary residence was across the river in New Jersey? Well, in place of Oz this year, Republicans are running David McCormick, another rich carpetbagger who spends most of his time at a $16 million mansion in Connecticut, bought with his hedge fund wealth. And he's not alone. To challenge Senator Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, which is a very contested swing state, Republicans have selected Eric Hovde, the CEO of a Utah-based bank who lives in a $7 million oceanfront mansion in Laguna Beach, California, not far from his main office. Hovde also recently took fire for defending his claims about voting irregularities by suggesting that residents of nursing homes are too close to death for their votes to count. All this is a reminder of the weird paradox of the Trump era, that only Trump actually gets away with being Trump-like. For everybody else, being outrageous and offensive and polarizing and repellent does come with some political costs. For them, gravity does exist. And this has led Republicans to pay very tangible costs in lots of winnable races over and over and over again. They should have a majority in the Senate, honestly, with better candidates. This election so far is looking to be a similar story. But of course, there's still the guy at the top of the ticket who has, last count, 34 felony convictions and is running neck and neck with the incumbent president. We'll talk about that next.